Party of Two right here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Party of Two. My name is Andrea Donica, one of your hosts.
And I'm one of your other hosts, the Internet's Mark B. Donica.
And today we are going to be talking about Inanimatronics.
Inanimatronics?
That's right, Inanimatronics. That's where we go over no longer with us attractions, shows, any sort of fun things that we can partake in theme parks and amusement parks around the world.
And it's hard to describe it without using words that other channels have sort of coined. So we decided to talk around it a lot.
Weaving. Constant weaving.
Hugo weaving.
Not that, I mean, maybe they have copyrights on certain words, but I mean...
No, it's just more of association.
Yeah,
we want to
yeah.
associate our own stuff with our own
Though
stuff.
we respect the other people that do talk about these sorts of things. But we want to talk about Inanimatronics today. And today we are going to be talking about the former Disney Hollywood Studios attraction, The Great Movie Ride.
Yes, we're going to be getting the replacement to this ride later this year in the form of Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway. I can't believe I said it for the first time without messing up.
Well, you know what? The more you say it, the more it rolls off the tongue, I've
I suppose
noticed.
so.
I think that it's going to be great. I'm really excited, but I do lament that we are losing a bit of the magic of classic Hollywood, especially for the location with the Grauman/Mann's Chinese Theater facade.
Especially that was the centerpiece of the park.
Yeah.
And I say the park because I didn't know which title to go with, especially with the rumor that they're going to be... this was the last vestige of movies, like of pure movie making, I would say.
And Disney MGM Studios was the original title of the park.
And then Disney Hollywood Studios, and now...
We don't know because
Disney's...
there's really no... This was the last straw for it remaining mostly like Hollywood.
Yeah.
Now there's really nothing left except for maybe Tower of Terror,
Well,
kind of.
not even. It could just be in a Hollywood-themed land, but there's still some behind-the-scenes stuff, but it's not as exclusive to that park. Like, Launch Bay can be considered a behind-the-scenes look at some stuff because they have props and depending... We didn't really tour the one that was in Florida when we were there because we had it, but they might have the behind-the-scenes stuff on Rebels and the various movies and things like that.
Potentially. I also remember there was just a lot of walls up when we went.
Yeah.
Just because of all of the demolition for the former tram tour that they had, which we'll get into on another episode.
Yeah, but it seems to be pretty popular to talk about right now, so we're not going to talk about it.
No. Of course. That's for another day. But I was really excited to talk about this attraction just because when we went to Florida back in April 2017, I was super excited to finally experience this ride. This was what the fan community said, this is the one spot you have to hit. Do not miss this. This is the centerpiece of the park. And now the fact that the centerpiece is gone, really the original spirit of what this park is no longer there. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting that this park is going to have Mickey and Minnie and Pixar and Star Wars. There's really just a huge jumble of different thoughts and franchises and ideas that doesn't really maintain the glamour of classic Hollywood anymore, which I think is a bit of a bummer.
Disney Leftover Park.
Oh. Disney Fun Park.
No, no.
I'm joking.
I know.
Well, did you think that Leftover Park was going to be something that they would go with, honey?
I had a sneaking suspicion that it could be pretty good. I mean, Pixar had a short about a lost and found bin. So, just saying, if they make a good story out of it, then it's something. Disney's Andy's Room, because you can find all of these things as toys.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be a lot different of a scenario if the Roger Rabbit area
had actually been
made.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some of the stuff with this ride, and to put it quickly, this went through a bunch of different. The initial idea was supposed to be for a movie production or show business themed pavilion that was going to be at Epcot.
Yes.
I didn't know that part. That was remarkable to me.
Oh yeah, that was the whole incarnation for everything. Michael Eisner had just been brought in as the new CEO, and he was checking out all the plans and was talking with Marty Sklar, a wonderful Imagineer from Disney's repertoire. And Michael said, hey, I think that this is strong enough an idea to have its entire park around. And Marty agreed with him. So they got to work. They started talking about building a completely brand new park. They were also trying to compete a little bit with Universal ahead of the game. There's a whole lot of drama with that. Again, something a little bit more for another episode, but there's a lot of history with it, a lot of back and forth drama, because Michael was in the industry and he had been with Paramount before coming over to Disney. Anyway, Michael got into an agreement with MGM to have a partnership to use for a licensing agreement the name, different movies, etc.
Some of the biggest classics. Just the MGM was responsible for some of the most a lot of the household name films that I don't know if. I think our generation is the last generation to carry some of these through, because it's harder to. Some of these movies don't necessarily hold up, and it's not due to it's a different time now.
Yes.
Like with movies these days, it's really about action, hold my attention for X amount of time, and really keep me moving. Something that I really enjoy that isn't done a lot is the use of silence. And when people do use it a lot of the times these days it's primarily with horror, but there's something that a good silence can do. And even if thinking back to the Casablanca era of film, nowadays silence is just like a hiss because the audio hasn't necessarily been super cleaned up depending on which version of the movie you watch.
Yeah.
But this era of movies, this was one of the things, though I'm not as adamant about it as some people are of the Twilight Zone, and like people removing the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror from California for Guardians, which ultimately is a better decision theme park wise. And this is a better decision theme park rides, but because Mickey and Minnie don't have their own ride, so the fact that they get their own ride is huge, absolutely huge.
And it's about time too.
Mm-hmm.
It really does surprise me that it has taken this long, and it's appropriate for their 90th anniversary year that it's finally going to come to fruition. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy for them. I'm very happy for them, but I am a little sad. I've always been nostalgic for old Hollywood, and maybe it's because we've grown up in Los Angeles and just been around that our entire lives. And going to Universal so much as a kid and just throughout my entire life, I've always had an appreciation for Hollywood. My father worked in the entertainment industry, so I would visit him on set.
Yeah.
In and out of different production studios. And there is something really magical about the filmmaking process and the television process. It's a completely different world, which is why it makes perfect sense to me that there are entire theme parks dedicated to the idea. Mm. So it is kind of jarring to think about how that is just going away. And maybe it's also a huge notice to how people are consuming entertainment nowadays. Mm-hmm. people prefer to do it from the comfort of their own home. They don't want to venture out as much. We're constantly using Netflix and Hulu and YouTube.
And soon Disney Plus.
And that's just so convenient. But when we were kids, we used cable. We didn't have this vast array of internet options and streaming services.
And cable was a lot smaller back then.
Yeah, it was simple. You didn't have 500 plus channels of different options. You had maybe 60, 70,
something like that,
somewhere around there. Well, and you would find Turner Classic Movies or just like a AMC. You would just flip to that station and just keep on going with whatever was playing. And of course, Wizard of Oz was one of those classics. All of these different things would just play back to back, and you didn't have to necessarily actively watch them if you were a kid, but just having them in the background, suddenly you turn around and you see all of those bright, vivid colors from Wizard of Oz, and you go, oh, what's going on? That's amazing.
Ours was the last generation where TV and film was the only way to get to another world from the comfort of your home.
Yeah.
So now the internet has opened the world up very positively.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm very interested in the Great Movie Ride. In doing the research for this, I found out that Eisner just kind of shopped this around a bunch. And it was originally, okay, yeah, we have the theme park that we're going to be doing, but we're also, all right, we're going to take it to Europe. Okay, Europe didn't do that well. All right, well, we're going to do this Burbank thing where we're going to have our own studio backlot in Burbank.
That was something that I hadn't heard of before researching for this.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That would have been really cool, but I can also see why that wouldn't go because there's only so much room in Burbank.
And then it also seemed like this would be a shoo-in for
California Adventure. Absolutely.
And then huge budget cuts from that as well.
Chop, chop, chop.
We just chopped it all up.
Thanks, Euro Disney.
Yeah, but my favorite version of what this ride was going to be, which I think would have lasted a lot, there's a possibility that it would have lasted a lot longer, was the proposed Muppets version.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunately due to the death of Jim Henson. The Henson family afterwards got a little bit more tight with the Muppet brand, and this was before Disney bought them. So we got Muppet Vision 3D out of it, but we were supposed to get Muppet Movie Land. No, that was supposed to be the ride that this was going to be in, but then the ride itself was going to be the Great Muppet Movie Ride, which would have had the Muppets reenacting the famous movie scenes.
Which I think would have been so charming.
Oh, hell yeah.
So adorable.
Very much so.
It's too bad that they didn't bring that instead to California Adventure as well. I think that would have worked out nicely and probably would have had a better shelf life as opposed to Muppet Vision 3D.
I was going to say is Superstar Limo.
Oh, yeah, by leaps and bounds. Oh, yeah. Why didn't they make a whole Muppet section of the park? Well,
that probably could have been. But apparently,
licensing, everything else, that's going to be a huge part of today is agreements with other studios, agreements with other franchises and brands that Disney didn't own. That always plays a huge part in what ends up sticking around, getting built in the first place. Because if both parties can't come to a comfortable agreement in terms of how much things are going to cost, or how much it costs to brand things in conjunction with each other, with who's going to get how much of a cut of what, it's not going to go through.
No.
This is how deals are constantly falling apart, which is really fascinating when you're reading the backstory of certain things.
And we're going to tell some of those stories today.
Yes, we will.
It's like we've already started the show. But with the Great Movie Ride, this was one of the main selling points to me. Like you talked about how production was important in your life. For me, it was how are they going to tell this story? What kind of a story does this ride tell by featuring all of these movies. I'd probably watched a ride through, but still was like,
Yeah.
And when we finally got to go, it didn't necessarily all fall into place, but it was still
exciting.
It was one of those things where we were riding through history, which you don't get very often anymore, especially as things start to change. I wish that we got more ride style dioramas, I guess. I don't know. It really, by having the animatronics based off of real people and stuff that we've lived, this more than the tram tour, then this may be a controversial opinion, but this more than the Universal Tram Tour or really any of the maybe except for one. This is the most I've felt, quote, living the movies.
Absolutely. I'm actually surprised that Universal hasn't done something like this with some of their classics. They kind of just gloss it over.
They do in the form of their Halloween walkthroughs at Horror Nights.
True. But I've also been surprised that they haven't actually made a ride that is directly referencing their classic horror films. Imagine an entire ride just going through a bunch of different scenes and trying to escape the clutches of all of these different classic Universal horror monsters. That would be something to see.
Yeah. But we're not talking about that right now.
Right. I know. Don't be such a strict guy on all this stuff.
Producer at heart.
Okay, right. So, let's fast forward to them actually building the attraction.
Let's do that.
The entire building is modeled after Hollywood's Grauman's Chinese Theater, or also known as Mann's Chinese Theater, depending on when you're looking at ownership. Mm-hmm. Another fun thing about franchises. Disney couldn't actually call it either the Grauman's or the Mann's Chinese Theater for licensing issues, but that doesn't mean that they weren't making good friends with the people that had actually built the theater. They were actually able to give the exact building plans from everything down to the exact measurements to how they put together the roof. Every little thing, the original builders handed those plans over to Imagineering, so they were able to do everything exactly to those requirements, which I think is absolutely fascinating, really, really cool. And with the original Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, you've got handprints and footprints in the front. And so Disney had those made as well with some of the classic Hollywood stars, but also a major focus too on Disney or Disney-related characters. So you had Donald Duck and C-3PO. C-3PO and R2-D2 are over in Hollywood, by the way. Really cool. I do recommend checking them out. And a bunch of different things.
Ernest from the Ernest movies.
But then also really big stars like Audrey Hepburn, for example. Really, really cool. You enter onto the inside, and this is when it really diverts from looking like the original Grandma's Chinese Theater. On the inside of the real one, it's actually quite small before you get into the main theaters. I've had the lucky experience to go. Obviously, Disney has to put together a queue, so it's much more spacious, but the traditional Chinese style artistry continues through the queue. It's really beautiful. I'm hoping that a lot of that stays. I hope that they kind of do maybe a slightly Mickey Minnie-fied version over certain pieces, but I hope that look stays the same.
Well, it's very Chinese. So yes. I hope that, you know what? you take that art. There's a rumor that there's going to be more stuff done to the China Pavilion in Epcot. You take that art, all of that presentation, and you use it over in Epcot for whatever new thing is coming. And so that way it's preserved and untouched, and then you can go back and redo it.
That's a good idea.
I tend to have those from time to time. I have so many good ideas, but nobody pays me for them. That's the problem. I give this stuff all out for free.
Wah, wah. There were a lot of original Hollywood pieces of memorabilia that you saw on screen. For example, Mary's carousel horse from the original Mary Poppins. Have to say that now. That's weird. Was in the queue. Maria's dress from Sound of Music was in there. Mm-hmm. There's a pair of ruby slippers.
Freddy Krueger's sweater. There are a lot of dresses.
Yes. Well, I mean, we ladies, we got to have lots of dresses ready to go. And one of my biggest things that I always love to check out is actually seeing former dresses that starlets wore in the golden age of Hollywood.
Well, good thing you said that, because I was going to start with something that was a lot more recent. But we had the dress worn by Maria in The Sound of Music. We had the green peacock Elizabethan dress worn by Judi Dench in Shakespeare in Love. We had Sid Charisse's dress from Brigadoon. Veronica's dress, played by Judy Garland, from the good old summertime, and Rose's dress from Titanic.
Titanic?
Titanic, yep.
As you're going through the grand lobby with all of the different pieces, a lot of the dresses, you're going to make your way through, and then you enter into a smaller movie room, and you have the late, great Robert Osborne talking about different movies from the golden age of Hollywood. This wasn't always there. This was a licensing... what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
Sponsorship okay. With Turner Classic Movies, which was really great. Just kind of talking about different things.
So one of the things that I found interesting is, so 2015 we got this thing from Robert Osborne, and it's very long. It's a lot long. Like no offense to the Great Movie Ride, but it seems more times than not that area would be a little bit more empty. Like we waited in there maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that video is about an hour long. So I would love to see some sort. I'm pretty sure somebody has it, but I would like if Disney released or Turner released what that special was, and maybe they put it on TV as a special or as a digital special.
Yeah,
or
that
whatever.
would be nice.
Now that the ride's closed, and we didn't do research on that because this came up in random conversation. But that's one of the things that I felt bad about is a lot of stuff. Especially when it comes to movies, people who don't stay till the end to support the crew, they stay till the end to see if there's a stinger at the end. Mm-hmm. But there was an editor and a couple of producers and Robert Osborne himself that put all of this work into that video piece, and I want to see it.
Yeah, me too. After you leave this room, you go over to what is essentially a blown up soundstage. Not exploded up, a larger soundstage.
A seemingly full-size soundstage.
Thank you. I'm struggling with words today.
It happens.
There is an old-style movie camera and some switches. Very, very, very old school. And it's nice. It's cozy. And you see the ride vehicles there. They seat 70 people, which is pretty darn great.
70 normal-sized people.
Normal-sized people.
Six rows per car. One of the things that I found interesting is this is similar. This was at a time when a lot of the exits to rides would just dump you in the gift shop.
Yeah.
But this was more a traditional like roller coaster where they dump you off kind of at the same spot where people get loaded in. And I guess that might have been one of the drawbacks of building a similar replica to the Chinese theater. Because then you can't. There's no gift shop in there's gift shops outside the Chinese theater,
sure, lots.
but not in the Chinese theater.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to do for a slow-moving ride. You'd figure for numbers they would want to get people in and out as fast as possible, but it's like, you're going to be on this ride for a while.
And it really did move slow. How long was the ride? I think
Average length is about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
From what I saw, it was 22 minutes, but like actual beginning of the ride when it's a crawl almost, but like you could,
almost painfully.
You could walk the ride a lot faster.
Yeah.
But the entryway, especially if you're in like the rear car, it's such a slow thing, and you could probably listen to Hooray for Hollywood 2 or 3 times before you get through the front door, but it's slow.
Very, very slow. However, going through that grand marquee with all of the lights flashing, really, really cool. Pretty disorienting too.
But that's the problem is we were so excited for this ride, and then for it to start so
slow. So slow. And you can tell too, the vehicles can move a little bit faster, as we'll get to a little bit further on our tour through the movies. But we say hello to Cecil, and we're off, and we come to the first
Moonlight Parade?
First scene, which is Footlight Parade.
Footlight Parade. Hi.
Now, interestingly enough, this scene had the most problems throughout the ride's history. And only after a year did it no longer have its original workings in place. So this is based off of a water scene. And all of these beautiful, beautiful, tall, elegant swimmers, they've got their hair up in those little bonnets, all of their makeup done perfectly,
Swimmers
1930s.
Caps?
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
And probably almost all blonde, if anything else.
Presumably.
And the Imagineers had all of these mannequins. This is exactly modeled after the certain scene, but they're on this giant cake that was supposed to spin around, and they had water jets going, and some of the mannequins off to the side were on diving boards, all sorts of things, and everything decorated Art Deco style, really beautiful. Unfortunately, these water jets would flood the track, which was not good, obviously, and the cake was constantly breaking down. So after a year, they just shut everything off.
Yeah.
And they put a scrim in front of all of the mannequins with some floral pieces kind of spinning around. Very, very strange at the end of it.
Well, yeah, especially something that's supposed to be celebrating motion picture. You've got something that is still, and you try to liven up with like a disco ball or gobos, moving lights, all sorts of specials. And the scene itself, I think, is the least known movie quote franchise in the entire ride. It's a spectacular moment, but we've gotten a lot better moments, and I think there could be another. If this broke down the first year, I would have immediately worked to find another thing in the licensing agreement.
I agree.
To replace it, because when it debuted, this was an amazing effect.
Yeah.
But it stopped being an amazing effect, so then there was kind of no point. You get something else musical related, because that first bit is about the musicals and how they expanded from the studio style of movie making, where it's just pump them out, pump them out, pump them out.
Yeah.
You could have grabbed something from that period that could have been a little bit more iconic, maybe something that involved water too, because that seemed to be the light theme moving through. You went from pool to rain to just the fog of London, but something could have replaced that scene, because it's, you start the ride and the entire show underwhelmed, and you're, to be fair, you're immediately brought back out of it by entering a very quick and easy scene from Singing in the Rain, where it's just Gene Kelly singing in the rain, hanging off of the light post. It's a very easy effect. You just put the water in front so it makes it look like it's raining on him from all angles. Very easy to do, but it immediately brings you back. But the moment should have built a little bit better, and by keeping that Footlight Parade in there, sure, you're acknowledging movie history, but by it, like, you could just look at a picture. Especially back then, you could find a picture in an encyclopedia. You could watch the movie on Turner Classic Movies, or American Movie Classics, whatever. That the scene, once it broke down, hurt the ride.
Oh yeah, it's, you never want to start with a broken foot, which is what this kind of feels like.
Yeah,
it makes me sad. I think that they, as you said, 1 year into it, just so automatically having problems. Clearly they didn't test it enough, because they would have noticed the problems a lot more quickly. They should have worked better at finding a better draining system, recycling with the water, maybe pumping the water a little less aggressively, perhaps.
At the same time, we know this era.
We do.
We know this era of Disney and who's responsible for all of this stuff. So it's not necessarily as much of a surprise. It's just unfortunate that you start off on such a poor foot. But instant gratification.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Gene Kelly inspected his own audio animatronic for a likeness. This happened with a lot of the different actors that are shown throughout the ride, because the likenesses needed to be really as close as possible. So if the actor themselves wasn't around, the estate, so maybe their children would come in and take a look and say, yes, this is good. No, you need to tweak this. So I always found that really interesting and really cool.
Yeah.
So after Singing in the Rain, we go to Mary Poppins. And
we're in London, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mary is flying, just floating gently by a chimney. The effect is simple, but really cool. And they're singing, and you see the chimney sweep silhouettes kind of bouncing around in the background.
And it's the refrain of Chim Chimney, which is so pretty.
Yeah.
Like,
their harmony. Oh my gosh.
It's very interesting. Yeah, that one of the reasons why I was interested to see how they told the story is scenes like this, where we have this sort of uptick of Hollywood musical, classic Hollywood musical, a little bit of Disney flair thrown into there, and then of all of a sudden we're in the middle of the gangster scene tribute.
Yeah, and it's interesting because at first you think, when you start with Footlight Parade, maybe they're just gonna go really by time period sequentially of where everything is going.
Yeah.
But no, they start out with the movie musicals, and then we go to the gangsters and film noir. So we kind of backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
And we end up with another live being amidst all of these other audio animatronics. And you end up having one of two experiences.
Yes.
And the first, which we're going to talk about, is with the gangster sequence, which is primarily what Disney would operate with. And we encounter this live performer named Muggsy.
We had... Sorry, go ahead.
Who is being very aggressive with our... Oh, we didn't even talk about this yet.
About what?
So with our ride vehicles, we have a tour guide taking us through the movies. And Muggsy starts harassing our tour guide and forces them out of our ride vehicle. And a shootout happens, and our tour guide is just gone, and Muggsy takes over. It sounded like you wanted to go a little more into this scene, so
well, not really. Just that it was really unfortunate because we were in a weird situation with our ride because it was pre-announcement, but there had been some rumblings of whether the ride was going to close or not, and our Muggsy in particular wasn't as energetic as we would have wanted after. I mean, I
just wanted him to project more.
Yeah,
more than anything else.
Very, very quiet. Very much. This is a job, not as much of a. And I imagine once closing season was announced, all of the actors in the various live actors sort of perked up a little bit. At least I would hope so.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
But it wasn't as memorable of a situation for us that we've seen.
Yeah.
To the point where the Muggsy from another Parks podcast was a lot more energetic and entertaining than the one that we got on the ride itself. But this, and especially we re-experienced the ride recently via internet, and it baffled me a bit as to what kind of the point was.
Yeah,
really, because with this, the other version makes more sense to me. So if you're in one car, you get Muggsy, and Muggsy becomes your, not necessarily a tour guide, but he or she hijack the ride for a little bit for two or three scenes, and then that's it. And without really, just by going, this ain't Joyzy or stuff like that, and oh my goodness, the person that
Muggsy
we had
needs a getaway car, and we have the getaway car for Muggsy, so that's really the only reason why Muggsy grabs us. Also, we're complicit because we've seen everything, I suppose.
But also, I think that comes up at some point. But they get away, and we go into the Western scene where we see Clint Eastwood, an unspoken man with no name from his various spaghetti westerns, as well as John Wayne, which awesome.
Oh, so cool.
Very cool.
I would say the John Wayne riding on the horse audio animatronic combo might have been my favorite thing from the whole ride. And he's warning us, we're entering into dangerous territory, shootout territory, which is not a good place to be headed.
Boo. A little mixed up with your rides there.
Hey, I mean, tour guides on slow-moving vehicles, my favorite thing.
Tour guides on kittens and wait.
What?
But if you've gotten Muggsy, you just sort of drive through this Western thing. You see Clint, you see John Wayne, and you just kind of drive through the next scene.
Yeah.
But if you're in a different vehicle, this is where you stopped. And this is where you stopped, and there was a shootout, and you get your live actor here. That was either Kate Durango or Kid Carson, who assists with the shootout, takes the guide, goes out and is like, "What's all this then?" and ends up becoming a part of the shootout. Runs into the bank. The bank robber blows up the bank. Now that, I think, is a much better idea of and shows you a little bit more of the movie side.
Yes.
Of seeing how an on-set explosion was made without saying, "Hey, we're going to do this effect," but more so than having a gun with blanks or flashing bulbs to represent lights, and a car on a track as opposed to on a set where it would either be a real car or a show car that people would push in and out, as seen in the Jimmy Fallon version of the studio tour. But this was, I think, a lot more conducive to movies. But the version that people seem to remember a lot more is the Muggsy version.
Well, and that's just because that was the default version to use. So they didn't always use the Western scene. If it was they only brought the Western scene out after a while during high peak season for how busy the crowding was. Otherwise, if it was a more tame time, you just always saw the Muggsy version. And that's the reason why. But for me, while both scenes are shootouts and you've got a lot of commotion, a lot of stuff going on, and it's all really cool. And of course, you see different parts of the sets, lights, noises, simulating bullets going off everywhere around you. With the Western scene, the fact that the entire bank is screaming with fire throughout all of the windows was an OMG effect. My when we watched the ride through video, because we didn't have the benefit of actually experiencing that part, seeing it, my jaw just dropped and I screamed. I was like, "Oh, that's really cool! Oh my gosh!"
And it's probably expensive.
Well, sure.
So you go with the cheaper option. But
Universal is much more experienced with fire in multiple places.
Well, there's a couple of things in this ride that were direct combat to Universal, and this is their, I mean, it's not much of one, but this is a backdraft moment.
Yeah.
So if you want to see something catch on fire, you go here. But I like this shootout better, and I don't know why it's so different in this, but the guy on the left comes out of cover more, and when he fires, there's more of like a classic Western recoil.
Yeah.
So it makes it feel a little bit more legitimate, as opposed to somebody like wide-armed holding guns up and like just going bang, bang, bang. Or how far away Muggsy would hold the gun from them.
Yeah.
It's just like, yes, this is a theme park, this is this is that. But if we're supposed to buy that you're a mobster, that gun is this weapon is your life, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
You should feel comfortable with it, not like Austin, or specifically Mike Myers as Austin Powers. Mike Myers doesn't like guns and didn't like guns, so the ones that he used, if you watch him firing as Austin Powers, he's just like blinking and uncomfortable and nervous because of the flashing and the popping and everything.
Oh, I thought that was all a characterization
No, that
thing.
was Mike.
Oh, that's
It got better,
that's cool.
But especially the first Austin Powers, he was just like, I don't like guns. So specifically like that. That was my Austin Powers. How'd you like it? Rate, comment, and subscribe at Party of Two Pod on Twitter.
I have an image of my head of Julian doing that, trying to be Austin Powers.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But
you'll meet Julian
eventually.
Yeah.
Soon. Sometime. So after the Western scene, now you have one of two people. You either have the bank robber or you have the gangster. But one of the weirder transitions, and I suppose, I don't know how they would have done it, but if in between the scenes they had real lifeatized movie transitions, so like from Moonlight Parade to, or no, I keep saying Moonlight Parade, Footlight Parade, from that section, from the musical section to the city to the gangster movies, you could actualize a star wipe so that it's like we're transitioning into something else, or from anything that's a major thematic change or do something like the soft focus bar that George uses in Star Wars, or some sort of they
could do that today.
Mm-hmm.
Probably when they built the attraction, I don't think that they had figured all of that stuff out yet, but with the scrim and projection technology that they have now and how they can just pull things back so quickly, they could 100% do that today.
Well, not even that. I think, Star Wipe, you just need 2 thin pieces of something, a thin track, and have half of a star on either side, overlap them.
Oh.
So that when you pull them apart, you see the star, and then it just expands past and you go through.
Yeah, that would be cool too.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But we go from like as if the gangster to Western doesn't seem as off because you're going from wild region to wild region, but from going to the West to space, where we're on the Nostromo living the quintessential horror movie Alien, and you get to see Ripley with a flamethrower, and somewhere did you hear meowing?
Meowing?
Yeah, because Ripley has a pet cat, and so
I haven't seen Alien.
That's okay, but
I'm a big baby.
Sometimes in the background, if Muggsy wasn't talking or the bank robber wasn't talking, you could hear meowing in the background.
That poor cat.
No, cat's fine.
Oh, God.
But you see Ripley, and then you come face to face with the xenomorph, which is kind of scary, but it's also a little out of place.
A little bit. So the interesting backstory with this is on another past former attraction, extraterrestrial encounter. Originally, when they were developing that attraction, another one of Michael Eisner's pet projects, they were going to actually make a full-on alien attraction. And they had the licensing rights and everything that they had purchased for that. Ultimately, all of those plans fell through, but because they already had the licensing rights for it, Michael said, all right, well, let's include it in the Great Movie Ride.
And the weirdest thing being that, the weirder thing about it, the thing that sort of sticks out, is if you know studios and things like that, Alien is a Fox picture. Mm-hmm. So putting a Fox picture in the middle of all of these MGM classics was surprising a bit, but ultimately, wasn't it supposed to be a xenomorph and alien encounter? Like that's what it was going to be?
They never actually officially made a title for what the attraction was going to be, but it was 100% going to be a part of the Alien franchise. You were going to be attacked by the xenomorph. It just, there became so much backlash with, this is going to be too scary for people.
Yeah.
This is not Disney. The old school Imagineers didn't think that it was going to be something that the public was going to take in a positive way.
Yeah. Anyway, here's Alien Encounter.
Yeah.
Wait.
But the xenomorph in the Great Movie Ride actually attacks you 2 different times. Mm-hmm. And you're still moving kind of slowly in your vehicle at first. You know, you've just been passively doing this. The one time that these vehicles speed up is when the first xenomorph pops out and tries to scare you from the side.
Yeah.
And then it's like, all right, let's get out of here. And then a few feet away, then xenomorph pops out again from above your head, which I always thought was really cool. I really like it when scary things are coming from above your head. I love T-Rex from Jurassic Park and the hanging one.
Especially in a ride setting where you have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
That, because on either side, you can sort of creep in a little bit and edge into the person next to you on either side. But when it's above you, you can't get further into your seat.
No.
You're stuck.
Yeah.
So those ones are a little bit spookier. And another bizarre transition is, I suppose, kind of action movie to action movie.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the better transitions, but then you're also going back in time again. It felt like the Alien was probably the most recent thing out of everything that you see in terms of scenes in this attraction. You go back in time again for Indiana Jones. And
Raiders of the Lost Ark, specifically.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Indy and Sala are there trying to get the Ark out. And there's some fun little hidden Mickeys in this scene, primarily on the Ark itself. Mickey and Goofy are actually sitting down having a meal, which is lovely.
It's similar to the R2-C3PO Easter egg in the movie.
Yeah, I think it's a nice... Hollywood has all of these weird connections and different little hidden Easter eggs. So continuing that tradition, I think, is really cool.
And then, so the bizarre part of why we have somebody taking over at this part, I think maybe it was to make the alien part scarier, because you have a bunch of people that don't understand, as opposed to somebody going, well, this is Ellen Ripley from the Alien movies.
Yeah, that is the interesting thing. Not that you can fully understand always what your
guide.
your hijacker guide is saying with all of the noise and the music going in the background, but they're very confused. They have no idea what's going on. Though sometimes you'll hear towards the end, again with the Turner Classic Movies agreement, Robert Osborne's voice comes in every now and again to be like, this is from this movie and this is from that movie, and just kind of gives you a couple of little facts. So that was really one of the small ways in which your hijacker would be like, oh, well, I don't know what that is, which would be kind of weird. And you end up just passing by Indy in this room with this ancient Egyptian inside of a tomb style
this big
place.
Altar with a jewel on it. I think they name check Anubis at some point.
It's very much Anubis for the giant gold god that you're seeing to your right.
Yeah, so with our tour guide being of the criminal ilk, especially, I would say the bank robber more so, that the bank robber makes the most sense in all of these, which is weird, because Muggsy's just like, I gotta get away. Oh, look, a shiny diamond, as opposed to a bank robber who is like, I'm getting money. Ooh, more money.
They both like shiny, expensive things. They like things that will get them money. They like the high life. So they abandon you to go get the shiny thing.
And then they die.
And then they die.
They not just like, oh, they disappeared. They brutally die and we see their skeleton.
And there's another person there, shrouded in mystery. Warning your kidnapper, don't do this. You will be... There's a terrible curse that will befall on you. And, if Muggsy is there, they're like, forget you. And then they're fried. They are a skeleton with some ripped up clothes. And in a little bit of theatrical live magic, because there is a gust of smoke covering Muggsy or your Western kidnapper, they are gone. And in just a flash of light, suddenly your original tour guide is back, and everyone applauds, and it's kind of nice.
Somebody died. Like, it's so bizarre. We're celebrating death at a Disney park just because somebody had a bad turn. Like, yeah, we were being threatened with dynamite and or a gun, but that doesn't... We should have been able to talk this person down, not necessarily doom them to a fate worse than death, being death.
Well, everyone's applauding that the quote, anything can happen in the movies.
Including killing somebody. Jeez.
I mean, yeah. I guess we have to feel less remorse because they were a criminal. I guess that's the reason why.
I would say the one thing that I would miss out doing, which I had just gotten the idea for from another piece of media, Jeff Ramsey from Achievement Hunter, of after everybody applauding and everything dying down, going, "What? How did? No." Because, oh my God. Actually, I wonder. I think that's a fun new meme to edit those cues into applause breaks to just have in the background.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll do that really quick and put it on our social media, Party of Two Pod on Twitter. But from this, everything just goes back to normal.
Well,
we're back to touring through the movies.
Yeah, but we have to escape the curse that has befallen, because even though our hijacker is now deceased,
Very dead.
there's still a bunch of skeletons and
Moomies.
Zombies.
Moomies.
Moomy
tomb.
zombies that may come out and get us. So we break out of there, and then an even more random. This is the transition that throws me off the most out of everything, I would say, because suddenly you're in the jungle with Tarzan swinging on a vine, which ultimately is a pretty cool effect. Jane's on the other side, chilling out on
Timba.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing we see is Cheetah, which always baffled me about the original Tarzan movies. Is why would you want to confuse people by naming the chimp Cheetah? Like, I know it's a different area of the world, but still, it's like, oh, he's got a pet cat. No, it's a monkey. It's a chimpanzee. Bizarre.
Maybe it's a cultural thing that we're just never going to understand. Everything was a product of its time, you know.
Or it's stupid.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, this transition, I'd say, yeah, I would agree, is the weirdest. You can find some sort, like with Mary Poppins to the urban setting, it's London to New York, so it's not as weird. Western to Nostromo is the biggest leap. I think the in and out.
It's a pretty huge leap. The one thing I'll still say is, like, you're in defense mode, I guess, is my thought process of, like, I have a gun or some sort of explosive, and I am protecting myself from something scary.
So it's more of an emotional transition,
I suppose
than a physical transition.
And emotional transitions make sense to me.
You're right.
But
It's a movie.
But going from absolute horror with death and mummies to the jungle and yay,
Well, even more so,
jungle romance, woohoo, is just weird to me.
Well, also weird is going from jungle to airstrip, where I think I'll ask. No, I'm gonna save this till we finish talking about it. But this is where we get the final scene from Casablanca. The long rumor that the actual plane used from filming was there, but they weren't actually on an airstrip when they were filming. So how could it have been a real plane? Either way,
there's been so much back and forth with that.
The plane that they did use for this, they chopped in half an actual plane, put the front half on this ride, and the back half is on the Jungle Cruise, which you can see somewhere at the Magic Kingdom. But from there, we go into
the Sorcerer's Apprentice in Fantasia. Now, the interesting thing about this scene, one, everything is black, and because Sorcerer's Apprentice was a 2D animation that came out of Disney, they're basically we're watching a screen. We're watching a screen as we're passing through. We do see some effects around us of swirls and magic and this and that. But originally, this scene was supposed to be the cyclone sequence from Wizard of Oz, which was supposed to be a more natural transition into our next scene, where we are dropped down right in the middle of Munchkin Land. This is probably one of the creepiest, not meant to be creepy scenes throughout the
Munchkin Land
ride.
one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. The little munchkins, they kind of creep me out a little bit.
Well, they were...
And I mean, it's charming that they're singing The Wicked Witch is Dead. There's a lot of death on this ride.
Yeah.
I've just realized.
We're celebrating death. We're not just celebrating Hollywood. We're celebrating death. We're back to the dark place.
You know what? I'm in agreement with you on this. Maybe this ride is much more sinister than I've been acknowledging.
We're immortalizing the dead by their bizarre visages being featured. Now, yeah, that of course we're being silly, and I'm not being serious.
No.
There was as a quick aside, back in college, I don't even remember what the class was, but
was it the music, the scoring
no,
for?
No. It was no, because we didn't have any in-class stuff for that. There was some, I don't remember what the class was, but somebody talked about how Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln was like Walt Disney's weird way to bring back the dead, like a very esoteric and negative, glass half empty sort of look at why Walt immortalized Lincoln.
He just loved Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, and you know, people in our day, we can't listen to him speak. So instead, he figured out a way to help everybody hear the words. And now the speaking patterns of, we'll probably talk about Lincoln too, but
that'll be for another episode.
But it's still around, so what is there to talk about?
Well, no, but we can still appreciate the attractions that are still going strong.
Yeah, but Royal Dano's voice, while iconic now, people looked a little bit more into it. Lincoln sounded a little bit more like a tea kettle, as people have found in personal recollections of him.
A tea kettle.
Yeah, I'll find the actual quote. But so yeah, either way, I'm adverse to people negatively bringing up as to why people would immortalize stuff like this. But as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're driving through history here, and it's a completely different experience. So to be plopped right in the middle of Munchkin Land is a little off-putting, but we get graced with, closer to the end of the ride's life cycle, one of the most advanced animatronics that has ever been put in a Disney park, which is the Wicked Witch.
Really, such an amazing audio animatronic. Something that I will say just in general about this entire attraction, something that I was struck with, even though a lot of the audio animatronics were old, they still had really cool movement. I really appreciated how lifelike everything looked. And the Wicked Witch audio animatronic was the pinnacle, and how the auctioneer for Disneyland is the most advanced for that park. The Wicked Witch, at least for quite a while, was the most out of all of the Disney theme parks throughout the world. They would always do testing with her to improve her movements, and really everything down to the bounce back and the facial expressions and the arm.
Each finger could articulate individually. Like, that's the advanced motion that the A100, which did a little bit of research. The A100 is the current most advanced model that they're using, and they put it in with a brain. The technology that they used, the actual software provided more movement options available. So it wasn't just their in-house stuff, but they combined a top-of-the-line model with the top-of-the-line software to make a really a lifelike representation, which I flip and hope they do with more animatronics. Though I guess we've seen a little bit of it overseas. They're at the the most recent version of Pirates of the Caribbean in Shanghai or Hong Kong? Which one is the one that's entirely based on the movie? Isn't that Shanghai?
Let me double check.
Because the Davy Jones animatronic, I'm pretty sure is a high-tiered model. I'm pretty sure, but that's we don't have to double check on that right now.
Okay,
because
but that ride does look absolutely amazing.
Yeah, everything is in Mandarin though, so it will be interesting to ride that ride, and I wonder if we can understand what's going on. However, the movie ride ends after you come face to face with the Wicked Witch of the West, asking, "Who killed my sister?" That's my Margaret Hamilton. How'd I do?
Beautiful.
Thank you. After this, we have to get out via the Yellow Brick Road, which is where we come face to face with all of our heroes from The Wizard of Oz: Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, and Toto, of course.
These audio animatronics, too, in terms of their likeness, I would say is really spot on. Really spot on.
They just have a lot of solid sweeping motions, and there's not much to the movement, but even when they start to talk, Scarecrow bounces sort of like he does in the film, which is, I think, pretty iconic. But after this, we're led to... So both of these scenes are interesting because they feel like they were designed to help overcrowding.
Yeah.
Because the final Munchkin scene is where all of the cars reconnect. So whether you had the bank robber or Muggsy, both of these cars end up in Munchkin Land, and then from there you both go into the finale scene, which is just a montage of great movies hosted by Robert Osborne until you go back to the unloading area. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of movies with just a bunch of classic moments that have been added to in recent years, depending on what Disney movies have been released.
But while Disney had all of these partnerships with all these different studios, MGM, of course, Fox, etc., there is not a single Universal picture shown throughout the entire ride.
There are 60 films represented in in that final montage, and a lot of surprising ones. A lot of surprising ones that I would think, for at least for a Disney park, but not for cinema. A lot of these can be considered some of the greatest movies ever made, though I do disagree with their Star Trek choice.
Oh.
They use Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, as opposed to like Wrath of Khan or Voyage Home or even Search for Spock. But like Ten Commandments, Taxi Driver, Thelma and Louise, Malcolm X, The Matrix, Mission Impossible, A Night at the Opera, Dr. Zhivago, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Amadeus, All About Eve. There's a lot of stuff from varying styles. Arthur, Apocalypse Now. One that we're very familiar with, Arsenic and Old Lace, is shown a little bit, but...
And Tangled.
Oh, Tangled's in it, yeah. But and a lot of, I mean, if I named the Disney ones, we'd be here for
forever,
quite a while. But like seeing what the Muppet and that takes us back to the end of the ride. So I suppose we'll just sort of debrief. But going back to what the Muppets version of this ride would be, they listed Frankenstein and Peter Pan as possible scenes to recreate, and Frankenstein being a Universal picture, that would have been a lot harder to do.
Well, yes. The question is, I guess, how you go about it, because the other thing too is Frankenstein is originally a book. So
it is, but if it's, I don't know how that would translate to theme park rights, but Universal has made every Frankenstein movie. Essentially, they own the license. So given those two scenes, who would be the monster? Who would be the monster in the Frankenstein scene? And would it be Dr. Frankenstein and Igor? Yes, I just saw Young Frankenstein, so I'm saying Igor instead of Igor. I could imagine Rizzo and Gonzo
that would be really funny.
being Igor and Dr. Frankenstein, and the monster being like the Boris Karloff, but it's got Gonzo's nose.
Oh, yeah. I'd like that.
And then for Peter Pan, who would be Peter?
I guess I just always picture Kermit as whatever the leading male is going to be.
What if it's Robin? No, Robin would be Michael. Robin would probably be Michael. Kermit would be Peter, but green on green, that's a little gauche.
Well, come on, he's a green man.
And then you get Jane as Miss Piggy, and John.
Why did you say Jane? You meant Wendy.
I did mean Wendy. I'm sorry. We're talking about a lot of movies here, but because I was thinking John too.
Okay.
So the J names, and John would either have to be Sam the Eagle or Fozzie, just because you have the triumphants in there, maybe. Or everybody's a chicken. Who knows? Let us know what scene you would want the Muppets to redo, or what your ideas for those scenes are by hitting us up on Twitter at Party of Two Pod. So there was a question I was going to ask earlier on that I totally forgot by the time we were here, and when I re-listen, it's going to bother me. But what? We don't have the Great Movie Ride anymore.
I'm really sad, and I'm really frustrated that it never showed up in California Adventure. One, because I'm biased and that's closer to us. It was also supposed to end up, of course, in the studio park over in Paris.
Yeah,
and well, I know, but again, budget cuts. And it surprises me that for any park that Disney has built in regards to anything related to the movie industry, the film industry, that this attraction didn't make it, because I think that was also a nail in the coffin for the attraction in general, because if they had done that, they would have been able to update certain scenes. They would have been able to do a little bit more. And that's ultimately why I think we're never going to see it again. We don't have it anymore, because that's a commitment to refreshing. And that gets expensive, and especially when you have to pay for a lot of licensing agreements, things get really tricky. If anytime you're going to have to do a new audio animatronic, you have to deal with that actor's estate, make sure that it's up to standards. And Disney does not like to share.
No.
Disney doesn't like to pay for extra things. So once that Turner Classic Movies endorsement went away, there was just no way that was going to continue. Another interesting thing too, Robert Osborne passed away in 2017.
Yeah.
Earlier on in the spring. So it doesn't surprise me that later on that same year they announced that they weren't going to get a renewal for that sponsorship. And maybe that was also being respectful to Robert Osborne's estate.
And then
maybe?
If you look at it from a business perspective, then you have to if you want to do anything new, you have to re-record all of the dialogue, all of the on-camera stuff that could as you mentioned, be seen as disrespectful, but that's a lot of extra costs on top. So one more thing, I know this wasn't exactly what I wanted to ask, but for the Casablanca scene, that's got to be Kermit and Piggy, right?
Oh, of course. No, that was something I was thinking about too.
Then how do you flip that expectation? You have it be Gonzo and Carmela?
Yes.
Is that his girl?
I think it.
Chicken girlfriend's name?
I think it's Carmela.
Yeah.
You know what?
Look
That
at
would
you.
actually be really cute.
Like,
I ship it.
I think that would be the next thing that we would do, is go through all of these scenes and add the Muppets where need be. Which is all of them. They need to be done in all of them.
Okay, so Alien.
Oh, that's easy. Gonzo and Miss Piggy. Because Miss Piggy's just naturally disgusted by Gonzo, so it's more of a leave me alone.
Oh, I actually was thinking
Gonzo
the
is Ripley?
reverse.
Oh goodness. Jeez. Wow. Now we know your opinion, Miss Piggy.
Hey,
Jeez.
I love Miss Piggy. No one loves Miss Piggy more than I do.
If you love Miss Piggy more than Andrea does, or you think you do, why don't you leave us a comment on Party of Two Pod on Twitter?
I'm a Miss Piggy fan on the Twitter. I like to look at her tweets. She gives very sound advice about how to live your life, and I recommend checking it out.
She's a guru. She's a life guru.
She really does. She is all about self-love. Miss Piggy is the queen of that, and I'd say that if you need a little boost of self-confidence, even if you might think that her views are a little extreme in that way, it really will perk you up for the rest of the day. She really helped me throughout the holidays as well.
Oh, I remember the question that I wanted to ask.
I knew it would come to you.
What movie not represented in the Great Movie Ride did you always want to see represented in the Great Movie Ride? And is that too long of a question to answer?
No, not at all. That's a great question. I mean, my instinct is to say Star Wars, A New Hope, just because for a lot of these different genres, they have maybe a couple of different types of movies. That's really how the attraction is sectioned off. The fact that we only got one movie for sci-fi, I didn't think was fair. I felt that putting a scene from A New Hope in there was a no-brainer, really. And would have still been something recent enough and would have been also a slightly more family-friendly thing to do as well. So I'm surprised that they didn't have that in there. Especially with already having a Fox deal, I think that it could have been something that they could have done.
Possibly.
I mean, I know that, you know, everything with Star Tours, etc., that was a little bit further down the line. But really, only a couple of years later, all of those deals went through.
No, wasn't Star Tours was mid-'80s before this came out.
Star Tours opened in 1987.
Yeah, and this opened in 89.
Oh. That's
'Cause
right.
also they have,
I'm reversing things.
They had the Lucasfilm thing because Indiana Jones is already in the ride.
That's right. So even more so, I'm really surprised that they didn't have it then. What about for you?
For me, Star Wars is a good choice. I'm still stuck on the Footlight Parade thing, and I've been trying to think of a scene that has that big of a presentation that can be done in such a small space, and I don't know if you could, because also now I'm trying to think of transitions of what can fit into Singing in the Rain, and then I was like, oh, maybe we get another urban setting so that here's what something like this, where we move everything up. The first thing you see is Gene Kelly, which I think that
would have been a better way of doing it.
One of the most iconic things is Gene Kelly dancing to Singing in the Rain. And
it would have been a nice, easy way to come on into the attraction.
A light song as opposed to like a bombastic group number, quote unquote bombastic group number. So I needless to say, I'm thinking a musical, something else to celebrate the musical genre. And I was like, okay, what if we move everything up? So Gene Kelly's the first thing you see, and so that's nice. And then we go into Chim Chimney, which brings us into London, and we go from London to New York, and we do something from West Side Story, where now if you can do the two warring factions on either side, which puts your dander up a little bit, but you're still in that musical mode. And
then that would be a perfect transition into the gangster scene,
into crime stuff, because then you have you're feeling the grittiness of New York. It's still musical, but it brings you into more of a combative thing, and then you're ready for the other New York scene, but it brings you into New York a little bit more naturally, even though the London to New York transition is fine. But yeah, something like that. I was looking at some of the other musicals, but West Side Story is one of the most iconic ones. I was like, maybe something Sound of Music, if you could get the scope of the mountain scene and figure out a way to put people in that, and maybe I was thinking of that in the Footlight Parade space, where you could do a forced perspective to make it feel like you were in the but that's a big thing to start out with. So yeah, there's a lot. I was thinking Fiddler, Oklahoma. That is something to, if you switched the Western and New York scenes. And
now that would be interesting to have that be a divergence too, in terms of the layout of the track. So maybe on one side you go to West Side Story, and then on the other side,
something like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think especially replacing Footlight Parade should have been the top of their list. But let us know what you would put in the great movie ride now that it has gone to the world of Inanimatronics. All of these poor machines have nowhere to go. Hopefully they'll be reused in some way, shape, or form. Maybe in the eventual robot uprising we'll see them again. But until then, actually, really quickly, before we go, I just wanted to remind everybody, if you're listening to us on a podcast feed, we have a YouTube channel that we're kind of peppering with video content. I put up a review of Ralph Breaks the Internet earlier on. We have the Magic of Hogwarts, the Christmas at Hogwarts, the Magic of Christmas at Hogwarts, whatever it's called, on there. And so we're going to be peppering our YouTube channel with various videos, but that's also another place where you can listen to the podcast. So just go to YouTube, Party of Two Pod. It's the same thing. Check us out there. But if you're listening to us via podcast as well, leave us a review. We recently changed providers, so thanks to anchor.fm/partyoftwo, we're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on Google Podcasts. So leave us a review and take a picture and send it to us, because sometimes with some of these, especially Google Podcasts, it's hard to find our own page. So to see the reviews on those is a little bit difficult, but please send us the picture of that, screenshot of that, via Party of Two Pod. And if you would like to support us, there's a monthly subscription that you can sign up for on anchor.fm, which will help us improve the show, do more video spots, and ultimately help our theme park addiction. But until then, until the next time, Andrea, where can folks find you on the internet?
You can find me at Dole Whip Drea on Instagram and on Twitter.
And you can find me at Mark B. Donica. I host a bunch of other podcasts as well. And you can find out more information on those by following me on Twitter, Mark B. Donica. Follow us here at Party of Two Pod if you haven't got that information yet. But until next time, this is Party of Two saying we will see you on the next ride.